As you may know, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, that is IEEE, is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. IEEE Women in Engineering is a global network of IEEE members and volunteers dedicated to promoting women engineers and scientists and inspiring girls around the world to follow their academic interests in a career in engineering and science. The IPA, Indian Physics Association, was established in 1970 and is a major forum for serving and strengthening the physics activities in the country. Recently, a Gender in Physics Working Group is established under IPA with the mandate of coordinating national efforts towards gender parity in the Indian physics profession. Needless to say, physics and engineering are closely connected, and many of the issues related to paucity are common. Gender paucity are common. With this motivation, we thought of organizing a joint IEEE IPA program today.
And mathematics, it's not just the problem of women, but science is missing out on women and valuable contributions.
Okay.
Historically, there are many inventions and discoveries related to women, but the gender gap and the perception that this is not the ideal profession for women persists. The problems are of course complex, strongly influenced by cultural and societal issues in addition to academics. Many of you young women in science and engineering in the audience present today have made a bold beginning stepping into hot water, so to say. So to take this opportunity to learn from some of the women engineer colleagues who have overcome several challenges to establish themselves. This discussion aims to focus on forward. Little counts and can go a long way. And we of course need involvement of all, male and female colleagues, to increase awareness of issues as well as to find implement solution. So that's the of the panel discussion today. So before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I will read all the audience, both on the web and you, to type your questions in chat box and your email address as well. We'll try to take as many questions as possible. We'll try to answer them. Now let's introduce this session. Dr. Goswami is currently a senior professor at Research Laboratory. Did her PhD from University of Calcutta and then carried out and Institute of Nuclear Physics, Kolkata. Harishchandra Research Institute in 2002 as a faculty and shifted to Physical Research Laboratory in 2008. Her research area is terminology and special emphasis on neutrino physics. She is a well-reputed international expert in the subject and member of the Inter-West Observatory Collaboration. She has received several awards, including fellowship from Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Memorial Lecture Award and Scientist from NASA, and JC National Fellowship of PRB. She is an elected of all three science academies, NASA and ISC, and the World Academy of Sciences. And she has keen interest in improving the gender balance in physics. As a member of the first Gender in Physics Group of IPA during 2020, is the chair of this group. She was co-convener of the IPA conference and of its kind. Welcome, Professor Shubham. We also have Dr. Technology evangelist with a career spanning over 30 years of experience in software and infrastructural development, implementation, and management of enterprise IT projects. She took a degree in electrical engineering from Government Engineering College, Trichy, and Masters and PhD in Computer Science from USA. She is a award, including 3 prestigious international fellowships, Chevening Fellowship, Fulbright Scholarship, and SEC Scholarship. As a part of the management team of University, she underwent training in University of Netherlands. Active in professional organizations, hold leadership positions in the local, national, and national. Dr. is WIE, that is Women in Engineering member. She is currently the chair of WIE IEEE Kerala section. She was also the National Student Coordinator of Computer Society of India and was chair of Women in International Leadership Summit 2008. Welcome, Ravini.
Thank you.
Dr. Prasanna from DZTI in 1982 batch. She worked in the industry for 5 years before joining VZTI as a lecturer in 1980s. She continued working in for 21 years and in 2008 was instrumental in developing the lab environment. She has provided design consultancy several projects at the state and national level. She designed the curriculum for mechanical engineering, energy engineering, which is offered by the Mumbai University. She took charge of the principal of Don Bosco Institute in 2014, passionate about applying engineering to societal problems, especially areas of women's and tribal rural sectors, and guiding students design. Welcome, Dr. Prasanna. Look forward to hearing interesting from you. We have Dr. Satyanarayana. He is in Economics and Communication from University. He is from the Department of colleague and friend of long time. Currently, the coordinator of India Nuclear Observatory. Leading role is there. Deep and because started his deep on minds. He is from the of Vigyan Samagam, the Government of India Science Exhibition. Well known to the community. Welcome, Dr. And lastly, we have a Dr. Neha. She did her MSc from MS University, Baroda, and PhD from IIT in Bombay 2011. After a postdoctoral research at UCSA, Shanghai Institute of Applied Physics, China, where she had the recipient of a very prestigious awarded by the government of. This was an international fellowship initiative by the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the President's International Fellowship. She joined IIT as assistant in 2018. She is expert in experimental binary physics, so works in science. Her work is science engineering, working in IIT as bring in fresh ideas to this panel. So I now welcome all the this and we the discussion first which I would like to ask to most of the women of the panel is that coming here this there must have been some challenges, some difficulties, and somebody supporting it. So to say, a can break here. Something that motivated you to pursue in this career and something that really challenged you. So about these two in 2-3 minutes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So at the outset, let me thank you. Are you getting the? Hello. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yeah. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel. And I'm also looking forward to hear from other esteemed panelists. So to start with, yes, it has been challenging, but also interesting. I consider myself as one of the first generation in the computer science, at least in my part of the country. So to start with, let me just give you a brief introduction of myself. I'm from a middle class, traditionally orthodox eldest of two girls who studied in a girls' school till secondary. And I'm the first generation in the family to pursue technical education. And generally, in Kerala and in our family also, all the girls study at least till degree. Some continue their studies, then get married, and they are not very much interested in pursuing a career, but studies, of course, always given a priority. My class 7 maths teacher really influenced me to take up technical studies. I have always stopped my studies and got admitted in government engineering college through the state entrance examination with a scholarship. So that part was also not, it was very easy. It was just casual. Then the 4 years of undergraduate studies away from your house really changed your outlook in many ways. And I think that was a new environment, new friends, hostel life with minimal facilities, not at all like what the current students are having, very minimal facilities, but everything, all taught us to take the life easy. But my dream of pursuing higher studies in US never materialized. As the earlier speaker said, it is all the perception and the society and the culture that influences a lot. But doesn't matter. Thanks to USIF, my dream came through a mid-career Fulbright fellowship. So that is okay. But that is a difference what I found between where I was at that point of time and what I'm back to work. I'm making conscious efforts to reach out to the community and model to other young girls, whoever is interested in pursuing the studies. I always make understand the parents that you have to go out. Please, there should not be any gender difference in your learning. It is up to you to decide where you have to be 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. A point of where I can look back and say, okay, I'm so happy and I'm so, uh, I feel I've done something back to the society. So, and I feel so contented, when I get the feedback from people when they believe that I was responsible for the change in their life. That's all from me. Thank you. Over to you.
I think that was really nicely explained in a nutshell both the things that help. Jyoti, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. So thank you for this nice topic, and also, it's very nice to be with all the panelists in this panel and hear from them. So for me, I think that there were two things which perhaps motivated me to do physics. One is a curiosity and one is a logic. So I remember that when I was very young, I asked my father why the left hand is a left hand and the right hand is the right hand. And my father was a judge and he had no answer about it. And, I also didn't realize, but, that kind of a curiosity I had from a young age. And then somehow I realized that physics is the solution, like, physics is the subject which can help
I think we're not able to.
Yeah, I think she probably has network problems.
Hearing.
Probably she had a network issue.
Okay, maybe we will come. We'll I will invite Dr. Prasanna. I ask you that in this journey, look things different.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would like to share a bit of my journey. So I graduated. I think
Sorry.
there is an echo. So
So
okay.
come back. We'll come to you. 1 minute. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So I would like to share a bit of my journey. I was a mechanical engineer. I graduated as a mechanical engineer 40 years ago, and that was a time when there were absolutely no role models when I wanted to enter the industry. So when I decided to enter the mechanical engineering field, there was a lot of negative feedback all over as to how difficult it was for women to work on the shop floor and in the midst of workers. But I was very, very keen on getting that very valuable shop floor experience. So it was a pleasant surprise for me when Myco, which today is known as Bosch, everyone knows it as a German company, when Myco decided to take me as a technical graduate trainee for their Nashik plant, when no Mumbai company was willing to do so, believe me, in spite of being a graduate with honors and first class from VJTI, the companies in Mumbai were not willing to employ me as a mechanical engineer on the shop floor. So I had to relocate to a much smaller town, and that had a lot of challenges. I was in a factory with 2,200 male workers. I was the only female employee over there other than the telephone operator. So obviously, everybody was very curious about me. And the common question they asked me was, why did you even choose mechanical engineering? That was number one. And the number two question was, how did your parents even agree to send you to a small place like Nasik? But let me tell you that one thing that I learned being in the factory and on the shop floor is that the gender played no role in my effectiveness as an engineer. I believed that there was nothing I couldn't do. I worked in shifts. But let me also tell you that my ability to communicate, my ability to reach out to people and to empathize with them definitely made me much more acceptable and popular compared to my male colleagues. Well, did the men get threatened by my presence? Yes, definitely, definitely. There were several people who would pounce on at any small mistake that I made and bring it down to my gender. So I also realized that if I were to achieve any kind of success, that would also get a gender color. And that was absolutely not acceptable to me. So I worked in the factory premises for 3.5 years, but after that I moved on. I quit the industry and I moved into some other areas. But let me tell you what I missed working with Myco. I missed the presence of a counselor to share my thoughts and to support me. My colleagues were there, they were very respectful, they were friendly, and they were very supportive. But I think a mentor or a counselor would have definitely made a difference. And let me tell you that the industry was absolutely not prepared for having lady engineers on their role. Because even in the entire Nasik industrial estate, let me tell you, I was probably the first, and at that point in time, the only engineer, leave alone a mechanical engineer. So there wasn't even a community of lady engineers with whom I could communicate. So there were lots of problems. I had problems with use of toilets. There was absolutely no toilet which was assigned to women. And I didn't complain about it for almost a month and a half. So you can imagine how I must have struggled, even with my periods during those times. There was the safety equipment, which one had to, forcefully, compulsorily wear while going onto the shop floor, was just not available in my size. I had to wait for 2.5 months before any safety equipment was made available to me. And whenever I had to stay back in office or in college, there was always a male escort who was required because those were the rules at that point in time. But let me tell you, it was nothing that one couldn't handle. And when one is young and one is eager to prove oneself, I think these are challenges that you simply accept. But I would also like to add at this point in time that I have been a teacher of mechanical engineering for the past 30 odd years. And I have found my mechanical engineering girl students to be just as curious, as enthusiastic, and as capable as my male students. And on quite a few occasions, the top student in the class has been a girl. In spite of that, there are several challenges for girls to get into core mechanical engineering jobs even today. So there is a mindset that needs to really, really change. Whatever I need to talk about later, I will probably discuss subsequently after others have also shared their viewpoints.
Thank you, Dr. Prasanna. I think you have touched upon two very, very important points. One is even today, many places, many universities do not have adequate basic facilities like basic amenities, like toilets, and that is a big hindrance. And the about the counselor and mentor, yes, that's a very important point. Subhavati, you now can hear from you?
Yeah.
You got interrupted about the so
Yeah. Okay. So I said that, the motivation for physics may be the curiosity on how things work and the, logical development of ideas. And just to go back to the, the make and break points that I thought that I will discuss how from my PhD, starting from PhD work, I stayed afloat in science and managed to get a faculty position very briefly. So after my PhD, I submitted my PhD thesis in 96 and I applied for a postdoctoral position in physical research laboratory where I am now. My husband was a faculty member there, so we are in the same subject, and I applied for a postdoctoral position there, and there were a lot of problems, in getting a postdoctoral position. And I had a 1.5 year break, and in between I was expecting my child, and I got a desk to work, but it is not really always very good. I realized at that time that unless you have an official position, it's not very good for your self-respect at times. However, I continued. Then I joined PRL as a PDF. And it was very difficult at that time. My child was small. There was no creche facility available. We didn't even have a phone. And all these difficulties we had to overcome, and the system was not very supportive. I remember that, when I had to renew my PDF after 1 year, the head of the department wrote that I am insincere and I am not punctual. So, with a 1-year-old child, I used to come from 11 to 6 or something, which was not, there was no such time limit in PRL, and you can work in our work in off time also. And he didn't really have the idea. And if he says, okay, she's not very intelligent, I will admit. But if someone says I am not sincere, I don't accept that. So it was, that kind of problems that I had to face. And after my PDF in PRL got over, there was no possibility in Ahmedabad. And so I went and joined the Shah Institute of Nuclear Physics in Calcutta. And you can see that, I was asked this question in from Shah Institute also, that your husband is here, why are you coming? This person who asked me, he really helped me later. But these are the kind of questions that would come automatically to people, that how to, for the family reason, that how much one can pursue. And people even told me that why are you continuing with this, because you will never get a job in PRL. And at that time, I was not even sure that I have done enough work to deserve a job in any research institutes or universities in India. But my work was going on very well. And, I thought that I should be able to get some interesting results. And I was working in the field of solar neutrinos, and the results on which I worked on were very, very important. That subject got a Nobel Prize in 2015. And I was continuing with my work. I stayed with my parents, so it was a little easier in Calcutta. However, after 1 year, my husband told that my daughter has to be admitted to a school in Ahmedabad. So, that was a very difficult situation for me, because I didn't have any job guarantee. And I was not sure that later on school admission may be a problem, and all those things were there. And my husband said that he will keep our daughter, and I can continue in Calcutta. That was what we decided. But somehow my daughter was not very, after I came back after 1 year in Calcutta, I came back to Ahmedabad to leave her here, but she was not very comfortable without me. So like it was very, very difficult for me to manage the family in Ahmedabad and the job in Calcutta. And I had to fly many times between Ahmedabad and Calcutta and travel. And our salary at that time would be lower than the flight fare. Flights were very expensive. But I thought that, if I can do my work, because the work was going on very well, I thought if I can do my work and if I can do something, then, I should give myself a chance. So that was my thought that, since the work is going well, I should give myself a chance. So then around this time, some data came from these solar experiments, and we were doing analysis on this data. And then, this I had to work from cyber cafes, because at that time we would not have internet at home. So I will go with my daughter to a cyber cafe and discuss with my collaborators in Calcutta. And that paper which we wrote became a top site paper. And that established our group as a well-known neutrino physics group in the world. And that is I would say, my make and break point, that from that point onwards, it was clear to me that, yes, I can establish myself, I can get a job in this field, and I can be successful in this field. And, I was enjoying the work. Then I got a job in HRI in Allahabad in 2002. So I joined the job. Now, all these decisions were really very difficult, to separate a child from the father and stay alone with the child and, give enough time to your work and to the child. But, there are moments which define your decisions. And in my case, that was the moment when the paper that I wrote under a lot of, struggle, was really went into become a top-cited paper. And then from that point onwards, I thought that, I cannot leave this field. So that is the kind of
Thank you
for me.
reading the difficulties in balancing the family and career, which is also something tough. And it's nice to see that you try to with odds you have been able to. Let's move on to Dr. Neha. She is, I mean, as I said, one of the, and it would be really interesting to see that a lot of
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much, IEEE and IPA, for giving this opportunity to me and be a part of this esteemed panel here. And as you said, some of the things are just like old wine in new bottle. So I would say during my bachelor's and MSc, there was not any problem because we were enough girls in the class. So it was never like, oh, there are not enough girls in the university. And especially MS University, Baroda gets lots of students, and the ratio of girls to boys is very good there in principle. So for me, that was not the problem. The choice of career in science came because I admired my sister. She's also a mathematician. She works in MS University, Baroda. So she was my role model. I used to see her working so hard and all, and I was like, oh, this seems interesting career choice. And because of that, I mean, she had to face lots of social problems. I mean, because coming from middle class Gujarati family, people ask lots of this questions like, okay, she's doing PhD, but then she'll not find a suitable boy. And my father and my mother had to kind of answer lots of this kind of questions to our near family members. And then I also made the same choice. And for me, it was easy because she took most of the bunt on her. And then people knew that it's the same path she is also following. Yeah. But I mean, she was really my role model, and I followed her footsteps in a way. So, yeah. But as uh, Dr. Shubhavati said, that many a times we have to make a choice whether I choose my career or whether I choose to make my family priority. And many a times it ends up that we end up choosing the career because career has a limited time bracket. If you miss the bus, you really miss the bus, right? So then that basically that's a difficult choice we end up doing actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Neha. And yes, it's nice really that you had the mentor or in the family, but that of course yourself. And yes, many things to say for us, the girls graduate, they should manage. So the support from the parents is very important. I really also very appreciate also important, which hope will motivate more to support their girls
Yeah,
to go out.
support of parents is very crucial.
Yeah. Now, let's see a important in time, all our panelists said that there were very few women in India. You have been associated in CAFR with large groups, so I would like to see that how you seen changes over the last 3 decades and how you perceive.
Thanks, Vandana. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello.
Okay. Thanks very much for this nice opportunity for me to kind of say a few words. Maybe I bring a slightly different perspective. But before I even say one more word, I really liked Dr. Nambiar's life story very much. And in fact, part of what I'm going to probably say will have a lot of overlap with what she said, but in a different context. But it was fantastic listening to her. Let me say a few things about how you said, how things have changed from my school and college. So we had just one girl student in my high school. So that was daughter of one of our teachers. And similarly, as the speaker mentioned some time back, we had just one woman student in my engineering college who happened to be daughter of one of our professors. In fact, sometimes when I was just going to the government school, our village school, I come from a very, very small village. And one must remember 1960s is a different context altogether in those areas. I will come to that a little later. So sometimes to wonder, I see almost equal number of boys and girls in my very small village, but and then why only a few girls come to school? So I, as a 5 or 6 year old boy, I never understood why this is so. But then, those were also, as I said, different contexts, the days when our parents really needed all of us to work in the fields rather than go to schools, because survival was more important than school. And the simple formula is more children, more income, more boys, more income. And so it was the history, it was the fact, rather it was the historical fact. In fact, my own continuance of studies was in trouble many, many times because, as I said, it would be very difficult for our families those days to spare a male child to go to school. And because that is a double loss to the family. Number one, the income is kind of reduced. And number two, you may have to pay something more for the boy or girl to go to school. So just like there were also many, I would say supporting family members to other members on the panel, it was my elder brother who insisted that I go to school and continue in the school. Otherwise, of course, I would have been a farmer from about age of 10 years. And the story continued when I joined TFR in 83 after my engineering from JNT University. I joined a small field station. This field station is called Kolar Goldfields, where we did some of the pioneering experiments from 1980. I mean, experiments for early 80s for about 10 years. I want to tell a story that, in fact, again there were no women engineers or scientists there. So in fact, almost there were no women there except maybe one or two who used to cook for us. We are all, of course, bachelors. There were not even separate washrooms for, if any woman joins. For some years, whenever we were conducting recruitment interviews, we used to actually worry, that if you find a good candidate who happens to be a woman, how is she going to survive in the male-dominated office and even hostel? We're all bachelors and we're all living in hostel. But then, it took just for one woman, the first woman engineer, to join the lab and actually to break the glass ceiling. And the rest really, as people say, was history. And there were many women students then joined the Polar Goldfields. They came there, they worked, and there was absolutely no looking back. And this colleague of mine, of course, she is still in TIFR and she obviously doing exceedingly well. But what I'm really saying is, whether it was the example of today's speaker who actually mentioned that she was alone in the college when we were studying, but when she went back to the college to find that almost 50% of the students are women students. I think that was a fantastic change that had happened over a period of 35 to 40 years. So coming back again after I joined TIFR, okay, I was there for KGF for about 10 years. And when I came to Bombay, at some stage, as Vandana mentioned, I started interacting very, very actively with lots and lots of engineering and science colleges. And typically, I used to go and kind of interact or give a lecture or talk. Incidentally, today is the third such interaction happening. And what I really noticed and I really felt very, very nice about it is that there were typically equal number of female and male students in every gathering that I had addressed. And also, it was very good to see a kind of, particular practice that kind of happened not in one or not in two, but many, many colleges. And they were particularly doing equally well. And except that sometimes, like, when I go to certain states, like especially the southern states, like, for example, Tamil Nadu, every time typically I see there are almost equal number of boys and girls, except all the girls were sitting on one side and all the boys were sitting on the other side of the aisle in the classroom. But okay, I mean, that's about it. But otherwise, the kind of the ratio that one can talk about the number of people that in any classroom or any gathering, it was very, very heartening to know that there has been a big change in the scenario starting from my childhood.
Thank you, Sir. Very well perspective. As we all see in the last 2 years, in which there is an increased awareness. Because when I started my PhD, there was hardly anybody talked about these issues. Now, at least, the institute not has been, but at least the ball got rolling. So now, to ask views about proposals versus there are two things on which I think I would about to highlight the science, technology, and innovation policy. The major so if you could expand on this into the that would be nice.
Thank you, Vandana. So the science and technology, this policy or STEEP, the chapter 7 on this is on equity and inclusion. And it is very detailed, and there are 3 aspects that they have stressed upon. One is mainstreaming One is institutional and another is assessment. In the mainstreaming, what they may basically say is that equity and inclusion to be added to all the policies, the existing and the upcoming policies. And in the institutional, what are they saying is that the equity and inclusion charter to be developed and based on not only on gender, but caste, religion, geography, language, disability, and other exclusion and inequalities. So it has a wider scope than only gender. And another good point about it is that, it is also including the LGBTQ community and the Divyangans. So that is a very good point, that it is quite broad and very inclusive. And it mentions that, they at the institutional level, creating inclusive culture and network for awareness, outreach, and mentorship. Like Professor Prasanna mentioned about the lack of a mentor, and this specifically mentions that, that there can be these policies. So this was the thing, that there can be networks for awareness, outreach, and mentorship, and even for the recruitment and retention and promotion. They have the gender issue has to be taken into account. And also they mentioned about, collaborative efforts to be made with institutions having expertise and knowledge in this this equity and inclusion related research. So this is in the and inclusion part. And this is at a policy level, but I think there will be something on the regarding the implementational strategy.
Thank you. Now, ask Dr. Prasanna about the national education policy. Do you think it is
Yeah, so first and foremost, even before looking at the national education policy, which does tend to have several features which are looking for gender parity. Let me tell you that there is a big difference between what is included at a policy level and what is the ground reality. Just to cite an example, though I'm going back several years, just to cite an example, when I walked into the engineering college for the first time, I used to see these group of boys. We were less than 10%, girls probably 7% or so. They used to be discussing machines, physics, rocket science, and so on and so forth. And I used to be overawed because I didn't know all these topics. I didn't know to talk about all these topics. Because those days, when you have girls in the family, normally these kind of topics don't come up for discussion with girls. They do come up with discussion for boys. So you always end up wondering whether you have made the correct choice out over there. Today, yes, there is a huge difference because now families discuss a lot about technology with the girls. Families are very much in favor of girls getting into, parents are very aspirational about their daughters as well. They want their daughters to have the best education and so on and so forth. But let me tell you that there is a bias over here as well, because this doesn't serve even the new education policy. I have a feeling is, in spite of how well worded it is and how well intentioned it is, there are going to be difficulties, because if you are trying to look at universities, campuses becoming bigger and not smaller, and campuses trying to envelop so many branches and become universities for them by themselves. Remember, one big problem that girls have and parents have as far as their daughters are concerned is the ease of commute and the nearness of a campus where the girl will be safe, where they can monitor what is happening with her. Because yes, all of us are aware that social norms do not really take care of many of these factors. So when universities start becoming a little more further away, when schools become a little more further away, what is going to be the impact of families on sending their daughters to these kind of universities, I think is seriously questionable. So it might work in a metropolis, it might work with places where parents are educated and parents are aware, but will it prove to be a deterrent in smaller towns? And will parents, think twice before sending their daughters away to travel longer distances? I do not know. I think we probably need to understand what these ground realities are going to be. And having said that, I think the problem is not only, I would like to say that if there is a shortage of women in STEM, women have proved their capability. There is no doubt about that. So I would say it is not a woman's problem. Organizations have to become more gender mature. I'm not even talking about being gender sensitive. I'm talking about being gender mature. If you can give me a minute, I would just like to cite an example. Two of my closest friends who joined the IT industry way back, almost 35, 38 years ago, they left their children, both of them left their infants, 3 months old. They left them in the care of the grandparents to take up an overseas assignment. Why? Because they were competitive, they were ambitious, they were as good as the men. And at that time, if they turned down the offer, they would be actually downgraded in the hierarchy. So just to prove that they had the capability, they did that, and they did not see that child for almost a year and more than a year. This is a tough decision. And why don't at that point in time, organizations were not sensitive to the needs of these ladies. But today, girls are not willing to take these kind of decisions. They are very clear about their capabilities. They know how efficient and effective they are, and they are willing to call the shots. So if the new education policy needs to correct this kind of a gender bias, I think it has to go a lot more deeper and understand how what kind of implications this is going to have on women in general, and not just women who are in metropolis.
Thank you, Dr. Prasanna. That's really very nicely put several points for meaning.
Yeah, your question is national education policy aimed to achieve gender neutrality. My answer is yes, and I 100% agree to Dr. Nambia. She has really raised all the points. There are a number of policy measures to ensure and promote increased participation of girl children from primary to higher levels. They have in that policy it is mentioned about financial aid, social welfare schemes, etc. So the focus on making the education accessible is good, but gender is a social concept. As she rightly pointed out, it is not a girl's issue alone. It is a societal issue. Still, we are making certain things very stereotyped, I'm a man, I'm not supposed to cook in the family. This is something which we hear even now, in spite of all the advances we have made. So those things are beyond the scope of education policy, and certain social obstacles are also building in the way of educating the girl students. So financial incentive alone is not essential, but we need to bring in certain other changes, like, for example, as she has mentioned, building a scientific temperament among the girls. They should also listen to such things. It's slightly getting better these days, but still. And we have to teach the core STEM concepts. We are into the rote learning. Even now, we are following the old age rote learning concepts. There is absolutely no hands-on. Some students pass out of class 10 without even seeing a laboratory. So those kind of things actually build in the scientific temperaments, and that is what we are looking forward to bringing out. And also above all these things, there should be a capacity building of teachers as well as parents towards this applications of science. Where exactly the science, how this science is exciting. So that is what I wanted to tell you. And as I wanted to mention here is always the law stands. India is one of the countries in the world where I feel the laws are always very strong in protecting girls and women. Though slightly there is a small percentage of misuse, still the flaw is in the implementation always. So that's all. Thank you.
Yes, that's there's a very implementation is implement a lot to desire. Now, before I move on to the panelists, I would like to take a couple of questions from so you can question, please. Or try to simulation. Wait for a minute. Somebody is. Yeah, Ajit. Please answer and go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. No, about this new policy, as it has been said, there are a lot of details about equity and all that. I feel that the most important constraint for women comes from taking care of family responsibilities, and how these family responsibilities issue. I mean, partly, for example, this was mentioned in the sense of that women, the closeness of the institution is very important. These are the kind of constraints, but also the family responsibility. So some of these kind of things need to be addressed at policy level. The family, what steps have to be taken at the family for family constraints. So those things are not anywhere in that. So do panelists feel that, I mean, these kind of things should be included in this officially in this kind of policy?
Maybe Dr. Prasanna can answer this.
Honestly, it is very, very difficult for the policymakers to include all these parameters. But let me tell you, it is not impossible. I mean, I'm also a little surprised that when you make a policy which is all encompassing, it must pay equal attention to social matters as well. So yes, definitely, there have been umpteen number of cases where women have, and we read about it regularly in the papers, where women have been harassed, girl students have been molested, and they have been troubled when they are moving towards their school, in their own village, when they are moving from one part of the community to another, and they have to walk a certain distance to reach their schools. They are being troubled so much by people who live within the vicinity. So when these are the kind of dangers that they face, problems of moving a little far away are going to be a lot more. And yes, as Mr. Ajit has very rightly pointed out, responsibilities are there. When you are spending more time in travel to get educated, obviously the amount of time that you can spend at home is going to be lesser. And I don't think there are too many families, especially in the rural area and in smaller towns, that are going to appreciate that. Yeah, so yes, it is the social problems abound, and policies have to take these into account. So it is a little surprising when it is not being considered.
So, Bandana, if I can make
Yeah, quick comment, please.
So in the STIP policy, at least they mention dual recruitment policy, flexibility in work timing, and childcare benefit to be gender neutral. They are also mentioning about daycare center and provision for elderly care. But again, as I said, all these are at policy level, so we have to see the implementational. But at least some of these points are touched upon in this STIP policy.
Your is definitely for her, so that can. Unfortunately, the time is also gone. Now, Dr. So I would like to what you think, your view, attract and we need to do this. Maybe in a very, it's a vast thing, but to give your what. So, Neha.
Okay, Vandana, thanks for that. Okay, I just wanted to probably say a couple of words before I also want to share a little bit of what is the brighter side that we see in the workplace, namely the experimental collaborations that I work on. In the large context of diversity and inclusiveness, which is for the progress of humanity in some way. This particular, male-female disparity needs still a particular attention and in some way corrective actions by the society, sometimes organizations like institutes, but most importantly by the individuals, right? Admittedly, this has been a problem or a practice which is centuries old, so probably it'll take maybe decades to dismantle that. But some of these practices, as I was trying to say before, had their origins or in some way interwoven with some of the socio-religious or economic ecosystems which were prevailing during those days. But then the most frustrating truth is that the gender bias is taking much longer time to disappear than those ecosystems themselves, which are, I think, fast getting dismantled. So if you kind of little bit look at the changing scenarios, however small they are, one will kind of find further features in there, namely, that there is much more sluggish progress even in the science and technology fields as far as this effect is concerned compared to if I can say, more of secretarial and administrative sectors. What I meant is why there is a much smaller female to male ratio in bigger scheme of things in the science and technology areas compared to what you actually see if you look at the statistics in any of the labs worldwide, big scientific collaborations and so on. What are the cognitive metrics, if any, which influence such a development? Why there is a lesser bias or lesser, probably the ratios are much better in those fields compared to purely physics or engineering and whatever? I can't see any. But is that just the intrinsic or continuing bias of some of the decision-making class of people which is still influencing this disparity, rather very systematically? But in the process, we have been sacrificing the merit and progress which is kind of induced by inclusiveness. So it is not just, I want to also say at the end, we need to grow just not only, let us say, the binary division that one talks about, but I think there is larger inclusiveness of all heterogeneous capabilities of people, especially when we run large scale experiments. It becomes very important that you have engineers, technicians, men, women, scientists, and whatnot. And that is what the progress that has been shown in experiments like at CERN or any of those mega science experiments. And I consider that as a more of a social engineering besides the fantastic discoveries that these experiments have resulted in. It's not a joke to have 7,000 or 8,000 scientists of all countries, all caste, creed, whatever, working together and making that big progress. But I must end taking by 10 more seconds, coming very close to our own experimental collaboration called INO. We feel rather proud that this gender ratio in terms of either graduate students or the scientists in general is much better in our experimental collaboration, and we are very proud of it. And I hope we will progress much further and much faster than what is what we can see elsewhere and what society really needs at this time. So thanks very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you that in the had one woman engineer, I think. But even today, the workshop has about 80 plus people, which involves various technicians. The technical services, which is also mixture of engineers and the diploma people and the tradesmen, and no women. These are some of the things which we draw the blanks anyway. Yeah. Yes, I'm doing good. Hope that other things also will pick up the same. So now I to make give her comments on how to attract and return women and how do you see the changes in with respect to the early career.
Yeah, so I'll start with giving an example of this in the engineering admissions. So they have the supernumerary seats for the female candidates. Okay, and in my last 3 years at IIT Patna, I have seen that this because of the supernumerary seats, the number of girls enrolled in the engineering program year and year, we are seeing good increase there. So once you will have a good number of students coming in a stream, right? So we all know that when you go to higher level of education, they are like leaky pipelines. But then if you start with 50%, probably at the end, 20 or 15% will still survive, right? Out of that. So I think that is one good initiative we have in terms of policy implementation. And I think at the hiring level also, probably something in that direction may be kind of helpful to increase the number of female faculties in the departments. Probably, I don't know. In terms of funding, Government of India nowadays have lots of funding opportunities targeted to female scientists and female faculties. So one such program is Subpower. So that is one good thing. And also we have women, DST women scientists, but DST women scientist is kind of a short term, right? We need to have something which will basically sustain them long term, right? So after 3 years, where this women scientist will be absorbed. So we have to create more opportunities for this women, right? That who are taking the break, coming back into the stream, taking this women scientist fellowships and scholarships all. But then we have to sustain them, right? And absorb them in the system. So I think some policy in that direction would basically benefit a lot. We need to think about how to sustain the trained manpower we have created, I mean, human resource we have created, how to sustain that.
Thank you. This quickly summarize if there is any question check. So the question can take one question. Shikha, you have a question?
Yeah, Vandana, I just wanted Neha was like saying that it seems like there is an inherent bias which in hiring of women. So I don't know how can this equity thing address that.
Which panel to address this question? Sure. Sure.
Can you please repeat it, Dr. Shikha?
No, I'm saying that of course government can make a policy of having equity in hiring and everything, but this inherent bias, how does one take
Exactly.
that into account?
That is a very society inherent problem, you know, this bias. I think generation after generation, we are seeing a lot of difference, but stereotyping has to be changed. What is this is man's job, this is female job, and we are talking a lot about the work-life balance, which is not possible exactly. You know, we are skewing a lot of issues towards the responsibility of a woman And that is why during the early career, it is a really difficult time for the career woman when they start. If expectations are too much, especially in the Indian context, yeah, the bias is very, very high. So I think it is the responsibility of the society as a whole to give all the support to the women.
So it has been a very wonderful discussion, and just don't mean it as a word, but it has also been educative. It was nice to listen to the sort of journey over 3 decades or longer, and to see that there's still a lot to be more. But also one thing to points of having this joint thing was get the between here and the physicist, and it really is the basic common the choice between the and career means the career you take, but role of training counselors and teachers is important thing that comes in. And I would like to add my one bit is that as the by everyone so all as the which like by young male child will end up by a doll for a female child. Biases are always built in, go long way in deciding and our career. But the major factor is also because people is working in the you get included in the scientific and technical discussions many times. That is and on the note saying there are things opportunity. I must have never said I do. Don't give up. You will reach there. You will IPA gender page and actually for future information and things related. If you have any questions, do send me. I can press in the email. And you all for your discussion has been wonderful. Good learning for me as well. And I'm analyst for I'm making this event a success. The moment and I just Mr. Shiv. Thank you very much. We'll conclude.
Can we take a picture?
My video is no. I don't know if everybody's video is there, but Satya, please it can be done. Webex, I somehow could not connect the video, and I think even my Webex connection has problem. So you can unmute.
Yeah, I have taken a.
Alright, good. Yeah, I can't see.
Yeah, my video is also off.
Okay, so I think
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandana.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Krishna.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.